Imagine one day you wake up and find horns sprouting from your head, granting you magical powers. That's precisely what happens in today's story. At the start of the story, we meet Iggy and Maren, a young boy and girl who had been in love since childhood. But one night, Maren was brutally murdered, and everyone believed that Iggy was her killer. Although Iggy wasn't arrested, the entire town hated him, and there were always 15 to 20 reporters outside his house, hoping for a statement from him. To escape these reporters, Iggy often visited his parents' home to find peace. His family was doing everything possible to keep him out of jail, but the truth was, even they believed that Iggy was Maren's real killer. Iggy's older brother Terry assured him that he would stand by his side no matter what. After this, Iggy met his best friend, Lee, the only person who completely believed in his innocence. Lee, a lawyer, was the one who had managed to keep Iggy out of jail. However, shortly after, Iggy received news that the forensic lab where Maren's body was kept had caught fire, destroying all the evidence. This made it even harder to prove Iggy's innocence. To make matters worse, the police received an anonymous tip claiming that someone had seen Iggy dragging Maren into his car on the night of the murder. This news left Iggy even more distraught. Following this, Iggy went to a pub where one of his friends, Glenna, worked. Glenna had been in love with Iggy for a long time, but Iggy never noticed her because he only had eyes for Maren. After Maren's death, Glenna tried to get closer to Iggy, but he still showed no interest in her. That evening, Maren's father, Dale, and some of her friends visited the spot where she had been killed to pay their respects with flowers and candles. At that moment, Iggy was hiding in a treehouse nearby, drinking whiskey. He knew he couldn't join them to mourn Maren because Dale also held him responsible for her death. After everyone left, Iggy, overwhelmed with anger, began breaking the statues placed there. Glenna arrived and stopped him. Emotionally distraught, Iggy confessed that Maren attended church every Sunday and always wore a cross around her neck. Yet, despite her faith, she was brutally killed, and God didn't intervene to save her. This thought always made Iggy angry at God. He was heartbroken, and Glenna comforted him by hugging him, after which they spent the night together. The next morning, when Iggy woke up and looked in the mirror, he saw horns beginning to grow on his head. He asked Glenna if she could see the horns on his head, but instead of responding directly, she started revealing all her secrets to him. Then, behaving like an animal, she ate a box full of donuts. Iggy realized that this wasn't a dream. Hoping to find a cure, he went to a doctor. At the reception desk, he filled out a form, but suddenly, a child started throwing a tantrum, throwing her toys around. Her mother couldn't calm her down and suddenly turned to Iggy, saying, "I feel like just leaving her here." Iggy was baffled as to why she was sharing such thoughts with him. Feeling unsettled, he returned to the reception desk, where the receptionist told the mother to take her daughter outside because her noise was disturbing everyone. The little girl then went to Iggy and told him she hated her mother. A little while later, Iggy went into the doctor's room, where a nurse began telling him that her boyfriend was cheating on her. Iggy couldn't understand why people around him were sharing all their secret thoughts with him. Eventually, the doctor arrived and said that the horns would need to be surgically removed. Before the operation, Iggy was sedated. While unconscious, Iggy recalled the day he first met Maren at church. Before leaving that day, Iggy found a necklace Maren had left behind where she had been sitting. He used the necklace as an excuse to start a conversation with her. They became good friends, and soon after, Iggy showed Maren a treehouse in the middle of the forest. This place became special to them. When Iggy woke up, he found a blade stuck in his head while the doctor and nurse were having an affair nearby. Shocked, Iggy quickly left the clinic. He headed straight to a church and sought help from Father Mold. However, the father was horrified to see him and said that God was punishing him for his sins, and there was no way to escape it. Iggy, confused and desperate, went to Lee, only to realize that Lee couldn't see his horns. This made Iggy realize that good people couldn't see the horns. Afterward, Iggy went to his parents' house and met his mother. His mother, like everyone else, began revealing her hidden truths. She said she was tired of listening to Iggy's problems and confessed that she didn't even want to see him anymore. When Iggy found out his mother disliked him so much, he decided to leave. At that moment, his father appeared and told Iggy that he hated him for what he had done to Maren, which he considered a sin. However, since Iggy was their son, his father had set fire to the forensic lab to keep him out of jail. Iggy realized that he had the power to uncover people's secrets and decided to use this ability to find Maren's real killer and make them confess. Determined, he got into his car and headed to the pub to find some clues. As usual, several reporters surrounded him. When they asked for a statement, Iggy sarcastically suggested they fight each other to decide who would get an exclusive interview. This led to chaos among the reporters, allowing Iggy to slip into the pub unnoticed. Inside, Iggy wanted to find out who had given the police false testimony against him. After talking to a few people, he got his answer and returned to his car. Inside the car, he found an engagement ring he had planned to give Maren on the night she was murdered. Only Lee and Terry knew about this plan. According to the plan, Iggy intended to celebrate with Maren at the pub after she said yes to his proposal. However, on that fateful night, Maren told Iggy she was moving to Los Angeles and could no longer be with him. At that moment, a waitress approached to take their order, but noticing the serious conversation, she decided to return later. During the argument, Iggy began suspecting Maren of loving another man, which he believed was why she was breaking up with him. Maren left without saying anything further. Shortly after, Iggy went outside and saw Terry there, but, in anger, he got into his car and drove away. After driving aimlessly for a long time, he stopped at a quiet spot and fell asleep in his car. The next morning, the police found Iggy, and Officer Eric asked him when he last saw Maren. Hearing this, Iggy became extremely scared and asked what had happened to Maren. However, Iggy himself soon became the prime suspect in her murder. Determined to clear his name, Iggy went to the same restaurant where he had planned to propose to Maren. There, he confronted the waitress, Veronica, and asked why she had lied to the police, claiming she had seen him dragging Maren into his car. Veronica unapologetically replied that she gave the false testimony to gain fame and attention from the media. After learning the truth, Iggy went to a restaurant where his brother Terry performed in a band. After the show, Iggy called Terry over and told him that he had identified the witness who lied to the police. He then asked Terry to go to the police station and give a statement, as Terry had also been there that night and had seen Iggy driving alone. But Terry made a shocking revelation. He confessed that on the night of the murder, he had given Maren a ride. Hearing this, Iggy became furious and started beating Terry. Thanks to the power of his horns, Terry told the whole truth. That night, he had offered Maren a lift home, but halfway through the journey, she got out of the car. Terry tried to call her back, but Maren said she wanted to go to the treehouse. Terry decided to wait for her there, but he was drunk and soon fell asleep. The next morning, when he woke up, he found a blood-stained rock in his hand. Terrified, he ventured into the woods to look for Maren, and near a tree, he found her lifeless body. Scared of being implicated, Terry didn't call the police. Instead, he erased all evidence and kept the incident to himself. As Iggy was assaulting Terry, the police arrived and arrested him. The next morning, Lee somehow managed to bail Iggy out again. Later, while they were talking, Iggy noticed that Lee was wearing Maren's cross around his neck. That's when Iggy realized the truth. Lee then confessed that Maren had gifted him the cross, but Iggy knew deep down that Lee was the man Maren had fallen in love with, leading her to leave Iggy. This realization was a massive blow to Iggy, who immediately went to Maren's father, Dale. Iggy asked Dale if Maren had ever mentioned being in love with someone else. Dale, however, was furious with Iggy and told him to leave the house. Like everyone else in the town, Dale believed Iggy was Maren's killer but lacked the courage to take revenge himself because he was a good man. That's also why Dale couldn't see Iggy's horns. Later that night, Iggy went to an abandoned building and repeatedly banged his head on the rocks, trying to break his horns. Suddenly, he noticed the place was filled with snakes, all moving toward him. Iggy tried to defend himself with a stick, but soon realized the snakes didn't want to harm him. One snake climbed onto his shoulder and coiled around his neck. That was the moment Iggy's mind filled with rage and a burning desire for vengeance against everyone who had wronged him. Iggy first decided to punish Veronica. That night, as Veronica closed the restaurant and got into her car, she began applying lipstick, unaware that her car was full of snakes. Within moments, the snakes attacked her. She stumbled out of the car, injured, and found Iggy standing in front of her. Iggy told her that this was her punishment for her lies. Later, Iggy called Lee to meet him. He asked Lee how long he had been involved with Maren. Lee admitted they had been together for a few months and said he had been sure of Iggy's innocence. Otherwise, he wouldn't have helped him stay out of jail. Hearing this, Iggy decided not to punish Lee, thinking he was a good person. However, before leaving, Iggy took Maren's necklace from around Lee's neck. The moment Iggy did this, Lee could see his horns. Iggy then realized that Maren's necklace had been protecting Lee, serving as a kind of shield. Now, without the necklace, Lee was vulnerable to Iggy's powers. Iggy overpowered him, pinned him to the ground, and forced him to confess the entire truth. It was finally revealed that Lee was Maren's real killer. In reality, Lee had always been in love with Maren. As a child, he had saved Iggy from drowning but later regretted it because, had Iggy died that day, Maren would have been his. Lee revealed that on the night Maren was murdered, she had called him to meet. She told Lee that she had discovered a truth about herself that made it impossible for her to stay with Iggy. That night, she was planning to break up with Iggy and asked Lee to take care of him afterward. But when Lee saw Maren getting into Terry's car that night, he followed her. He found her in the woods, crying after breaking up with Iggy. Lee asked her to come with him, but Maren said she wanted to be alone. Misinterpreting her sadness, Lee thought Maren had left Iggy because she loved him. Overcome with emotion, he kissed her, but Maren pushed him away, saying she would love Iggy until her dying breath and had never thought of Lee in that way. This rejection enraged Lee. He picked up a nearby weapon and struck Maren on the head, killing her instantly. He then stole her necklace and placed the blood-stained rock in Terry's car to frame him for the murder. As Iggy was processing this, Lee attacked him. Lee explained that after Maren rejected him, years of longing and patience had been wasted, and he couldn't control his anger. He struck Maren and made sure Terry looked guilty. Lee overpowered Iggy and knocked him unconscious. He then dragged Iggy to his car, planning to stage his death and make it appear that Iggy had confessed to the murder before killing himself out of guilt. Lee doused the car with oil, set it on fire, and pushed it into the river. However, Iggy managed to escape from the water and survive. Hours later, he visited Maren's father, Dale. Seeing Iggy alive, Dale was shocked. Iggy once again insisted he wasn't Maren's killer, and this time, Dale believed him. Dale invited Iggy inside and gave him a key Maren had left for him. In gratitude, Iggy returned Maren's necklace to Dale. Dale explained that the necklace had belonged to Maren's mother, but knew Maren would have wanted Iggy to keep it. When Iggy wore the necklace, his horns disappeared, and he returned to being an ordinary human. Iggy then went to the treehouse and used the key to open a secret box that only he and Maren knew about. Inside, Iggy found a letter from Maren. In the letter, Maren revealed that she had known she was going to die soon. Like her mother, Maren had cancer and had only a short time to live. She had wanted to start a family with Iggy but knew it wasn't possible. She didn't want Iggy to suffer as she had seen her father suffer after her mother's death. To protect Iggy, she had decided to push him away. With the truth in his heart, Iggy went to Lee's house. Lee had no memory of what had happened, as he had been under the influence of Iggy's powers. Iggy tricked Lee into going on a drive to the woods, back to the place where he had killed Maren. Realizing his secret was out, Lee tried to defend himself, but Iggy had already heard the truth. Iggy gave Lee one last chance, asking him to surrender to the police. At that moment, Officer Eric arrived with Terry. Seeing Iggy alive, Eric realized Lee had tried to kill him, making him the prime suspect in Maren's murder. Cornered, Lee confessed to the crime but suddenly grabbed Eric's gun and shot Terry in the leg. When Iggy tried to intervene, Lee shot Eric in the head and threatened to kill Terry. To save his brother, Iggy removed the cross from his neck, causing wings to sprout from his back. But as he tried to fly, the wings caught fire, and his body burned to ashes, fully transforming him into a demon. Lee fired repeatedly at Iggy, but the bullets had no effect. Terrified, Lee fell to his knees and begged for forgiveness. Even after everything, Iggy felt pity for his old friend. But Lee betrayed him again, attacking Iggy with a rifle. Enraged, Iggy drove one of his horns through Lee's body and ordered his snakes to finish him. The snakes attacked Lee, one even entering his mouth, killing him brutally. With his revenge complete, Iggy finally succumbed to his injuries. His mission on Earth was over, and he reunited with Maren in the afterlife, leaving this world behind forever. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.